Hey guys, welcome to Mad Scientist Barbecue. I'm Jeremy Yoder. I'm joined by Cooper Abercrombie of Bar-A-BBQ. And today we're going to show you how a professional trims a brisket. So I've been hanging out at Bar-A-BBQ, learning things, observing, eating the food, which is excellent, by the way. And one of the things that I noticed is that Cooper does things a little differently than I do. And one of the biggest differences between an amateur barbecue cook and a professional is how they trim briskets. It's one of the starkest contrasts, because you can find amateurs who run fires in a similar way to what you might find at top restaurants. You can have similar kinds of smokers with amateurs, but what I very, very rarely see is an amateur cook who trims like a pro. And Cooper has another wrinkle to how he does it. He's using a slicer like this rather than the standard boning or trimming knife, you might call it. So Cooper, you're doing a lot of volume in comparison to what the average backyard cook is doing. So let me ask you this first. Why the slicer instead of a typical trimming or boning knife?
I've just found that over the course of a day having to trim 24 or 28 briskets that it just tends to hold up a little bit better. We get a little bit better strokes on the fat. They're nice and smooth versus sometimes you get a little rigid with some of the fillet knives. And it gives me a nice finished product a little bit quicker than a fillet knife does.
And you have people who come here for brisket classes. What do you notice with the people who come here for classes as maybe a couple of the most common mistakes they make while trimming?
Yeah, they're definitely seem to be always scared to take off the proper amount of fat on a brisket. I think people tend to under trim versus out there that over trim the briskets. Mm-hmm. And they definitely struggle with going to this type of knife, at least for the first couple ones. I think a lot of people are really used to kind of pushing with the fillet knife versus the slicing knife. It's a lot more just letting the knife kind of slice and do the work for you, not a lot of pressure down or sideways. But yeah, I think the biggest problem I see is most people tend to under trim the fat along that fat band on the brisket.
I think that makes a lot of sense. One thing I have noticed is that, for instance, people I know like Chris Stafford from Lone Mountain Barbecue, he switched to trimming with a slicer and has never looked back. Yep. He says it's infinitely superior. I tried it, and I'm not great at it, but I gave it the old college try, and I totally get the appeal. But the one thing that's objectively true is that whenever you see a brisket that's been trimmed and the fat looks smooth as a baby's bottom, you know that they were using a slicer or something similar to get that smoothness all over the fat. So with that said, can you tell us about this brisket and how you go about trimming it? Like, what are you looking for?
Yeah, so this is our typical brisket here at Bar-A. It comes from McLaren Farms. It's a upper two-thirds choice product. It's a great brisket. We get them in. They're supposed to be somewhat pre-trimmed. Really all that means is they come in a little bit smaller than other briskets. But something we're looking for is we're hoping to not see any scalping coming from the packer along that band of fat, especially towards the back end where those nice fatty slices are. We're trying to find something with decent marbling along this lean side here, which these are always great briskets. And we like to have a nice amount of lean to work with. We do try and leave as much lean on there as we can because it's all servable and sliceable here at Bar-A.
I like that. One of the things that I've noticed about the way you guys trim here is it starts off as a horribly uneven cut of meat, right? We have thick, we have thin, and then we have thicker and thinner. And by the time you're done, you have something that cooks fairly evenly. I think it's because you're merciless in how you trim. But enough of me rambling on. Let's let the master do what he does and show us how it's done. So I'll bow out and let you take over. I might ask you some questions throughout, but just let us know what you're thinking about as you go through the trimming process.
Yeah, awesome. Cool. All right, first
and
cut.
We're off.
We always cut right on that decal fat. We're going to cut most of this out anyway, so we're not worried about scoring into it. We'll try and get this out without making a mess as much as possible. Cool, so we're going to save all the trim that comes off this. We're going to use it for sausage or burgers later. But a lot of it, I'm trying to take most of that decal out because my goal here with this cut is to, when I flip this brisket over, it's going to lay relatively flat and not have a big hump or raised up on one side. From that point there, I'm going to flip this over. And I'm going to take out a good chunk of this mohawk here. I come from the top side. I like to be able to knock out two birds, one stone by taking out what I need to and also rounding my edges while I do it. I'm then rounding my edges, give myself nice clean strokes to work with. And that cut to me is always the one that kind of opens up the shape for me as I see it. Mohawk is out. I'm now going to round and take out the lean portion of this brisket, give myself ability to see the fat I'm working with on that band that comes along this side. So I now can see that. I'm now going to work top to bottom, shaving this down to 1/4 inch of fat. I'm rounding my edges while I do it. Because again, it's 2 birds, 1 stone. I'm able to take the fat I need to. I'll also give myself a nice rolled edge, which helps the bark formation in the cooker throughout the process on the smoker. I'm a little bit more, I kind of take my time on some of these, the back side. So I really want to make sure I'm leaving the proper amount of fat back there if I can and not scalp this. Because there's nothing worse than a nice, beautiful, rendered, fatty slice of brisket. And you see that ugly little double smoke ring where it was scalped up top. So I'm shooting for about 1/4 inch of fat there. I'm kind of feeling for anything that might be hard when I run over my hands. That's generally a good indicator that there's too much fat there. Okay, I feel pretty solid about where this fat's at on the back side. So I've got my fat where I want it. I have my mohawk relatively where I want it. Now I'm going to kind of just clean up some of this jagged stuff on the back. Because we're using all of this for sausage, we can be a little bit more aggressive if maybe something's not lining up how I want to. My whole goal with the back side is to be able to just to kind of cup it and get a nice rounded, ball shape back there. Cool. A little bit too much fat right here. Go ahead and kind of scoop that out. And then I've got my fat where I want it. My back side's where I want it. Now my shape. And this is where you can really kind of pick up on people's kind of their artistic touch to it. We try and leave as much as we can on there. Enough so that we think we can actually cook and it not burn up by being too thin. And then I'm just rounding my corner out. And that is a brisket ready to cook at Bar-A.
Masterfully done. You can always tell by looking at a brisket like that. It's like, oh, the person who did that knows what they're doing. I mean, yeah, it just looks great, and the level of evenness that you have, one end to the other, one side to the other, is a lot better than just when it came out of the package. And I think, yeah, to me it looks great, but I think achieving that is very, very difficult unless you've seen how it's done and you're like, oh, I like that a lot better than the way that I'm doing it. So I think that probably 98% of backyard brisket cooks could benefit from learning that method. I know I
agreed, 100%.
Because even in the way you do it, I've trimmed a fair number of briskets, but the way you do it, I'm like, oh, I think I'm gonna try it that way. Like the way you took the mohawk off. I've never done it that way. I always come in at an angle and move toward the point, and seeing you do it that way, I'm just thinking, why have I never thought to do it the way he's doing it? That just makes more sense.
A lot of it is out of necessity. If it's like 7 or 8 o'clock at night and we've been slam jammed and we got to trim 24 to get on for that night, you kind of just get going and it's just like, oh, I started ripping them from up here and that's a little bit quicker. And now I've never stopped not doing it that way. So.
Yeah. All right. I want to say thank you to Cooper and all the folks here at Bar-A for letting us kind of parachute in and see how they do things. For me, it's so much fun to learn from people who are really, really good at a thing, especially when they're really, really good at barbecue. And so, thank you, Cooper. This, I hope, has been a helpful video for you guys, but there's ultimately no replacement for getting hands-on and doing things yourself. There's a degree of separation by watching on video, and if you want to come here and learn from Cooper and do it yourself, get hands-on with it. They offer classes, and you can sign up for it. How do you sign up for it?
Just shoot us an email at info@bar-a-bbq.com with the subject line brisket class. One of us here will get in touch with you. We'll get you scheduled, and we host them every Thursday and Friday from 1 to 3 o'clock. They're one-on-one classes. And by one-on-one, we mean, hey, if it's you and your husband and wife, then you can both come. You're one in our eyes. But you won't have a bunch of strangers around you. It's a personal class to make sure you get what you want out of the class.
Cool. And we're going to put all that info in the description below. And if you want to check out their website, if you want to figure out when you're going to come to visit to try the food, which I highly recommend, if you want to sign up for a class, if you want to follow them on Instagram, if you want to follow them on their new YouTube channel, all that info in the description. I want to say thank you one more time, and I hope you guys get to make it out to at least try the food. It is absolutely worth it. I'll see you guys next time. I hope you enjoyed it. Doing a lot of volume with... Okay, try it again. We're doing big numbers.
Big numbers.
Okay. So Cooper, you're doing...